Labour MP Stella Creasy made a video talking about NATO and Trident, but within it, she went after the Green Party.
We've all met those people who can make a bad situation fundamentally worse by their actions. And in this current crisis caused by President Trump's frankly bullying over his demands for Greenland and Denmark, we've all met those people who can make a bad situation fundamentally worse by their actions. And in this current crisis caused by President Trump's frankly bullying over his demands for Greenland and Denmark, it's no different. The Greens are advocating that this country should kick American bases off UK soil and ditch Trident, as if either action would resolve this conflict or make us safer as a nation as a result. The reverse is true. It could damage valuable security and intelligence relationships that we have with America that also help us tackle the terrorist threats that we face. Ditching Trident, our nuclear deterrent, unilaterally is the last thing our European counterparts want us to do at this moment in time. It would mean that only France was left as a nuclear power in Europe. Ask President Putin what assessment he would make of the weakness of Europe as a result. What sounds like a great idea in the echo chamber of social media disintegrates on hard contact in talking to our German or Polish or Danish counterparts, those people at the front line with Russia, about their security needs. It is not the way to strengthen Europe at this critical moment in time. Because it is true that NATO is struggling. Those valuable relationships that we have relied on to keep us safe and to keep the peace for generations are in peril. But the answer isn't to walk away or trying to provoke further conflict. The answer is to find ways of strengthening and renewing those relationships. Now is not the time for posturing. It's the time for politics, bringing people together, collaborating, and working out how collectively we stand up to the bullies wherever they exist.
In response, Zach Palanski linked to his article in the New Statesman outlining his position. First, we need to disentangle our security apparatus from the United States so that we can be genuinely independent. As an urgent first step, the government should review how we might remove US bases from British soil while maintaining our own security and retaining the capacity to support our allies in Ukraine. If Trump were to take military action against Greenland, we must be able to act swiftly to remove America's military presence from our country peacefully and efficiently. The government should also cancel its £240 million deal with US firm Palantir, signed despite MPs raising serious security concerns about the company. Second, we need to ditch Trident and fast. Even supporters of nuclear weapons recognise the risk of maintaining a system that relies on the United States. Billions have already been spent on Trident renewal, but we must not fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. The government should immediately pause the renewal and bring a full debate to Parliament on whether we wish to spend billions of pounds on a weapon system that cannot operate without US support. This then began an exchange between the two, getting a little bit personal on Twitter. Stella Creasy wants to renew and strengthen our relationship with Donald Trump in this silly political attack video. Is it any surprise her vote share plummeted and the Green Party rose? We'll take it all the way next time. Stella Creasy came back and said, "It's getting to be a habit that the Greens make misleading statements about opponents and use them to try to provoke abuse. In this video, I called Trump a bully and argue we should focus on strengthening Europe, something which Zach's proposals for how to react explicitly undermines. When he shows yet again he doesn't know what he's talking about, believe him the first time." It's the same Labour playbook over and over again. 1. Attack the Green Party. 2. Turn replies off. 3. Accuse others of abuse. People see through it. Walthamstow can't replace their MP soon enough. She came back, though. Palanski has been caught out again. No doubt he will have to try to row back on the folly it will be for Europe's security for the UK to unilaterally disarm our nuclear deterrent right now because he can't defend such a stance as this conduct shows. Labour are complicit in a genocide. Labour are pretending we have a nuclear deterrent despite the fact it doesn't work and relies on Donald Trump. And all the while, they've got nothing substantial to say because they've tied our national security to the USA, some patriots. And Stella Creasy finally comes back and says, increasingly unhinged posts from this man, proving my point. Emotion not going to get Europe out of this situation. Proposing things like suddenly scrapping Trident means owning the consequences, not just shouting when people point them out. It also drowns important questions of how we make our security stronger with Europe, which is the subject of my original video. And to be honest, questioning my patriotism is what I usually get from the alt-right trolls. Alt-right, I mean, we've not really heard that term for a long time. We just say far-right and right-wing. I think it's an astonishing claim there. Look, people can have political disagreements on the existence of Trident, whether we should unilaterally get rid of them or not. But what I find extremely funny is that Stella Creasy is calling Zach Palanski unhinged, when first of all, he's rightfully calling out their dog shit foreign policy, enabling a genocide, sucking up to Donald Trump. I mean, we've witnessed over the last year Keir Starmer bend over and kiss Trump's feet. And what have we had in response? Tariffs. With the first round of tariffs. Then Keir Starmer continues to be a lapdog for Donald Trump. We now have a second round of tariffs, 10%, rising to 25%, because we want to stand, apparently, with Greenland. And I think it's kind of crazy to me that Stella Creasy is lecturing Zach Palanski on something which is really important to point out. Trident and our nuclear weapons is not independent. It's literally owned by the US. And I find it funny as well with Stella Creasy saying, well, Keir Starmer's held Trump to account. I called him a bully in my video. You're a backbench MP, right? You're not in cabinet. You know and important. Calling him a bully in a video in which he's not going to see means nothing. And this is what the Liberals do. They'll say certain words, they'll pretend to be harsh, but when it comes down to holding power to account, they do absolutely nothing. Barry, what do you think of Creasy's attacks? I mean, she's your MP. Now, she believes scrapping Trident unilaterally is a bad idea. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think, yes, she is my MP, and I think I know the reason why she attacks the Greens all the time. And that's because she's in danger in this constituency, which, Zach Palanski, I guess, hinted at in the exchange they had. I actually put the stats on my screen here. In the last election, she got... Now, bearing in mind, Walthamstow was one of the safest Labour seats in the entire country, right? Not just in London, in the entire country. So the last election, she got 59.5% of the vote, which was a drop of 16.6%. The Labour candidate, Rosalind Rowlands, got 20% of the vote, which was an increase of 16.5%, right? So the Greens went up 16.5%. Stella Creasy came down 16.6%. And that's with the Greens running effectively a paper campaign. I mean, no disrespect to Rosalind Rowlands, I'm sure she's great, but she doesn't have any online presence. If you Google her, you literally don't find anything. They didn't leaflet, they didn't canvass because they didn't have the capacity to do so. And yet still they ate nearly 17% of her vote. And things have only gotten worse, I think, since. And, Green Party activists will mount a campaign here next time. They've said that. And they're already out campaigning and knocking on doors in the neighborhood. And I think it's having a really, really positive impact. And you've seen increasingly since Zach Palanski became the leader of the Green Party, her sort of lashing out at them. And I do think she's very vulnerable here. She is a very present MP in the community. And I think that the Greens have acknowledged that it's kind of the work that she does on the ground, the fact that a lot of people in Walthamstow think that she's a good constituency MP. But, I'm getting to the stage now where I think that the fact that she's a Labour MP is hurting her really, really badly. I actually, on another count, I think Gaza's been a big issue for her also in this neighbourhood. And I had a couple of guys come around, a couple of very young electricians to do something in my house. And they raised with me, did I know that one of the Palestine Action Hunger Strikers was from Walthamstow, and that they'd been around doing some work in a house, and that they'd heard from her parents about this. I'm sorry, I can't recall her name right now. And that gets around the neighborhood too, Re the argument with Zach Palanski on Trident, I didn't think that she was making much sense at all. And I actually thought that she was misrepresenting his position rather than the other way around. Because if you read his piece in the New Statesman, it's actually quite nuanced. yes, he's saying that we need to scrap Trident fast, but he's not sort of saying close the bases, chuck out Trident. He's saying that the UK faces very real security challenges. He said that, and he's also talked about the challenge from climate change, and he's talked about how the country needs to be safe. And in fact, he used a line that I think you more often hear from sort of centrist, more mainstream parties, which is that the first responsibility of government is to keep its people safe. Right? He said that. He said that clearly in the piece. So, I think that he has a nuanced position. And the other thing that she misrepresented is the argument for closing US military bases and the argument for scrapping Trident, whether you're, as he said, in favor of nuclear weapons or not, is that it's tied, as you say, to the United States. I think the missiles have to go back to the US for maintenance every few years. The UK does manufacture the warheads, but one of the key components of the warhead is also manufactured in the United States. And the argument that Palanski and others are making is the UK can't, Europe can't rely on the US as an ally anymore. And so if you can't rely on this country as an ally, why would you maintain a nuclear deterrent that's dependent on that country? It makes no sense. And I don't think that and why would she build that nuance into the argument that she was having with him? I felt she was misrepresenting him.
I think it's very interesting that in her sort of social media back and forth with Zach, she was saying, well, you're very much online. You're drumming up social media support. You can rely on black and white stuff. As an MP who's worked around government, I have more nuance here, which is ironic because, as you pointed out, when you read Zach's piece in the New Statesman, it is very ironic. In fact, he was speaking to the country because he wasn't talking about, obviously his position is to scrap Trident unilaterally, but he was saying very clearly, even if you're in favor of keeping them, I'm speaking to you too. And the truth is, we don't have independence over these nuclear weapons. You are right. They have to go back to the US for maintenance. So it makes no sense. And in terms of US bases, I mean, it's crazy. And this is just imperialism. I mean, embassies, fine. We should have good relationships with all countries, but US military bases?
There's a lot of them. It's like 10,000 troops or something. Yeah. This is an aside. But I highly recommend to all the viewers to watch, if they haven't already, an amazing drama from 1988 called A Very British Coup, which actually covers exactly this topic, where an old Union leftist from the north of England becomes
Harry Perkins.
Yes, well done.
Yes,
and the first thing he wants to do is to close all the US military bases, and then in come the US and British intelligence agencies to make his life quite difficult. It's really, really excellent, and yeah, that was made decades ago, and this is still kind of a topic of conversation on the left, right?
I agree. It's a fantastic not documentary. It's based on the book, but it could be real. By Chris Mullins, wasn't it? Yes. I got a question for you though. What did you think? I've not read the book, but I know how the book ends. They changed the ending. Spoilers, in the book, the nukes go off.
Whereas, I didn't know that. I didn't know it from the book.
So the nukes go off in the book, which is quite interesting. Whereas obviously in the show, it doesn't happen.
Curtis, you're spoiling.
I'm sorry. I mean, it was written in the early 80s, so come on, guys.
I am a former Labour MP, right? Chris Mullins, who also has written some very good diaries of his time as a politician. Yeah. Sorry, I really sidetracked the conversation there, but I guess the point is that this has been an issue for a super, super long time in this country, is the reliance on the US for security. And, I think for a long time people thought, well, the relationship isn't going to change, and our policies are always going to be in step, and we're always going to want to maintain the so-called international order, which is, the order that only the West benefited from. But it's changed, it's changed. And, even when you even have the likes of Mark Carney, the Canadian PM,
very interesting speech, wasn't it?
Saying, and whatever you think of Mark Carney, he faced it very head on and said, look, we're in a new place now. And so again, if you're in a new place, you have to look at Trident and you have to look at the bases. Whether you're a peacenik or in favor of nuclear
Mhm.
weapons, it doesn't matter. It's an issue for everybody.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about Mark Carney. He's a liberal, but in that instance, he pretty much called it right. And where the political zeitgeist is they think the old order is still here. But we cannot trust the United States under Donald Trump. Of course, the rise of China. There's a global realignment, and I think Zach Palanski, people will call him unserious, but of course, many people call you unserious if you don't agree with the political establishment. He's forward thinking. He's looking at the geological changes or the geopolitics that's changing. And yet people like Stella Creasy, they still think they're back in the world of the 90s. That's just where they are, I think.
Yeah, that's always the charge. It's exactly right as you say. If you challenge the status quo, you're unserious or you're engaging in student politics.
That's
this is the thing they always throw at the Greens. This isn't student politics. This isn't six. This is the real world. Because I think she use a phrase kind of like that when it hits up against hard reality, Zach.
Yeah.
But again, she did him dirty by ignoring the nuance in the New Statesman piece, which was not a sixth form piece. It was a very mature, sensible, measured piece, I thought.